I got to say that it is a relief not to have been presented a plaque representing a toilet or any other piece of equipment in one of the Austin grad restrooms. And whether or not you get anything out of my part of this presentation today, I hope that my previous contribution will at least be some relief to you at one of the breaks. You can tell that my elders have an interesting sense of humor, and the one that has the most interesting sense of humor is Stan's board member. And Bill Bradley really has been the driving force at Sunset Ridge for our partnering with Austin Grad over the years to bring speakers. That, I guess, got coupled with our church foundation back in the 1990s. After the foundation was formed to receive gifts to extend our ministries, our former minister, Roy Osborne, began to talk with one of our elderly members about contributing or giving the bulk of his estate when he passed away to our foundation. So when Hugo Hogger passed away in 1999, $2.5 million was given to our church foundation to extend our ministries in the areas of mission, benevolence, and education. Now, since 2000, our foundation has given just about $1 million in gifts. Unfortunately, not all of those have gone to Stan. But we meet every year in Green because he's working on that. And I must advise you that if you have a church foundation or a wealthy donor, you could also be a target of Stan. A word to the wise: before entering into such a partnership with Stan, you might want to check and make sure all the restroom stalls here have been dedicated. Our church foundation provided the money this year to bring James Thompson to Austin Grad. You've heard him make the presentations here. Those are different than the presentations he made for our church last Saturday on the book of Hebrews. He did 3 presentations for us, like he'll do 3 presentations here. Same approach, same kind of format. Those presentations were recorded. After the 3 presentations on the book of Hebrews, he met with a small group of our Sunday school teachers, about a dozen of them, and shared with them the adult Sunday school curriculum that he has, 12, 13 lessons that he's written on the book of Hebrews. In addition to the recording of those 3 presentations and the Sunday school materials and the recording of the lunch conversation, Dr. Thompson is also making available to us the PowerPoint slides as well. And on behalf of our foundation, we are making all of that available to you all. Because, as one of our elders said, and I think you'll agree after you hear Dr. Thompson today, that what he said to us the other day from the book of Hebrews is one of the most important messages that the church needs to hear today as it faces one of the greatest challenges. So at this time, I'll call on Dr. Thompson to come up and share with you the gist of what he shared with us the other day from the book of Hebrews.
Well, I also consider Sunset Ridge something of a second home because I spent some years here doing what Stan is doing. And Sunset Ridge was a favorite place, and I have a lot of relationships there. When I lived here, I discovered something about Sunday school teaching. And what I discovered is there were some pretty lousy classes at University Avenue by really very competent people. And what I discovered is a lot of people who were asked to teach really didn't have any resources to work from. And I was really amazed that they became good teachers. When there were books that were recommended and materials that were written, and then some of us at University Avenue from the faculty wrote curriculum. And I went to university in Abilene, and I found that Sunday school classes, adults, were sort of like many other big churches. Every Sunday school class was a fiefdom of its own, and with its own vision of what it wanted to do, and there was no coordination or anything like that. And after some lobbying, we actually got coordination. But when you coordinate and say we're going to do something in particular, somebody has to provide the material. And so I, along with some others, got into the business of writing Sunday school curriculum. And Hebrews is an example of that. The book of Hebrews is 13 chapters, and that means the book was meant for quarterly use. It's really kind of a daunting book. All you need to do to get fear struck in the eyes of people is to say, we are going to study Hebrews, because they'll start thinking of Melchizedek, and they'll start thinking of these obscure passages. It's really, really quite an obscure book. I'm reminded that I read some time ago about a seminary where the senior project was to preach a sermon from an assigned text. And so no one could choose his or her own text. And so you go and you look to see what is posted, what is your text. And the guy goes up, sees what's posted, and he's supposed to preach from Hebrews. And he said, darn, I wanted to preach from the New Testament. I guess it's my life mission. I've lived with Hebrews ever since about 1970. It's sort of, a lot of people think I wrote it. But I really have lived with it, and the great discovery of reading through is, for one who really in his bones is a preacher, is to read from a preacher who is writing a word of exhortation. And to realize that what Hebrews is about is not so much those intricate arguments that are hard to explain to anyone. What it's really about is exhortation. And it's actually addressed to a community of the second or third generation who are in a community that is really asking, I think, is it worth it to be a Christian? And I really do think Hebrews speaks to our time. There are two issues in Hebrews that really do speak across the centuries as far as I'm concerned. One is you are talking to a community that is marginalized, at odds with society, I suspect a people of means, of education, who are looking around and what they confess in church does not conform to reality, marginalized in society and second generation, and you know what happens to second and third generation of movements. First movement, first generation, all fired up, ready to go, ready to pay any price. Second generation is the routine has set in, and the second generation is going to be asking the question, is it worth it? All the price that we've been paying, that was nice back at the beginning, but is it worth it? And I look around at what's happening in our own society, and the most compelling question I think that churches are facing as we age, as we get older, and as we are more second, third, fourth generation, that question still is it worth it? And is there any compelling reason for people to stay around in church? As we age, what is it that will renew the church? And we've tried many different means of renewing the church. Often those are very quick fixes. But as I read what I think is the heaviest book of the New Testament, alongside Romans, a very heavy book, it just seems counterintuitive that you write a heavy book to people who are asking, is it worth it to be a Christian? Why would you go into such heavy theology to people who almost didn't get there, while others aren't there anymore because they have abandoned the assembly? I think he tells us something. What is going to renew the church over the long run? And that's where the heavy theology comes in. A church that's going to last over the long term is going to have roots. And the church that's going to last for the long time, as I think Peter Berger said some years ago when someone asked him, back in the 60s, someone said, is Christianity going to survive the next generation? And Peter Berger's answer was, yes, but those who are so bent on being relevant are not the ones who are going to survive. Those who have a commitment, a passion for what they believe, and a very strong conviction of what is true are the ones who will survive. And as I read the opening lines of Hebrews, I see someone who is writing poetry. Sometimes when you're really moved by your topic, prose just doesn't work. And so you have to speak with poetry. And what I see is someone who is still overwhelmed by the message into the second and third generation. And as I read this, I see the model for preaching. An author who knows his audience, he knows they're tired, he knows they almost didn't get there. But what are they going to need for the next generation? And I see someone who is still passionate about the central conviction that they had when they first became Christians. Passionate about it. You just have to sing it, the first 4 chapters. And then the rest of the book, deep roots to say, could you possibly throw that away? It seems it may be old, but could you possibly throw that away? It has changed your life. It has made us who we are. And I think that's what the author of Hebrews is trying to say to his audience. So I'll say one last word here. I mentioned at the beginning that people have some kind of anxiety about studying this particular book because of its depth and so forth. As I try to teach a book, I don't know that people come dying to have more information. I try to teach it in such a way that questions are asked that connect the text with where we live right now. What is our situation? Are we in the second generation, the third generation? How do we address the question? So I like to keep the dialogue. In every lesson that I have prepared, I have questions to be discussed by the group. And that question always, how do we encounter that text that is not only a text for antiquity, but really still speaks today, a word of exhortation. So, for some reason or other, I'm still passionate about Hebrews after writing a dissertation in 1974. I'm still passionate about it because I do think it's a church, it is an epistle or a homily that speaks to the church today. That's right. So, you got one.
actually had Dr. Thompson, asked Dr. Thompson to come based on something I had heard about Stan. Now, Stan doesn't know this, and I haven't shared it with really anyone, and so I could share it with both Stan and everyone today. What I heard was that after one of his sermons, you know, he's at the back greeting people coming out of church, and one of the women who was a church member that heard the sermon that day walked up to him and just said, "Stan, that was a wonderful sermon." She said, "In fact, I think that's the most wonderful sermon I've ever heard." Well, Stan, being the humble minister that he is, says, "Oh, that wasn't me. That was all the Lord." And the woman immediately said, "Oh, no, I didn't mean it was that good." Bottom line, none of us are that good. Year after year after 30 years, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, ladies' class, and all those other times that you get asked to speak because that's what you do all the time, right? And the hospital visits and other pastoral visits and the counseling and the texts last night during the last session that wouldn't quit, which ended up being phone calls until way last night. There are times that even when you try to get away for rest and renewal, that it just seems, it just brings it all back that I can't do this. I can't do this alone. And that's why I have been so very thankful, and our church has been so very thankful and grateful and so appreciative of Austin Grad providing these kind of resources through the years. And I have to confess today that frequently I go back to the beginning, to those old audio cassettes. I have to admit that my new youth minister and new children's minister, who neither one have been on this planet as long as I have been at our church, don't either one know what audio cassettes are. And when I tried to give them some, they just looked at me like, "What do you do with this?" And they do give me a hard time for having a radio, TV, film degree from Oklahoma State University. That was before the VCR was invented. But one of the advantages of that is that I do most of the time remember how to use an audio cassette player, and that I can put those tapes in and listen to them. And even though they are oftentimes directed for Bible classes rather than preaching, I do something that I have to give my wife credit for. It was one of those movies that she drugged me to. You guys know the kind. She denies even remembering going to the movie with me. But it was Finding Forrester. And Sean Connery's character is a writer, and he gives a younger writer that he's mentoring in the movie. This is about all I remember of the movie. He gives the younger writer a line and tells him simply to think about it and then start writing. I can't tell you how many sermons have come from taking a line from one of those old cassette tapes and letting it develop through me in the power of God's Spirit. That is why we at Sunset Ridge are committed to seeing this kind of work that Dr. Thompson has done not only here, but also for us on the book of Hebrews continue, so that there might be resources for the journey that aren't quick fixes, but that provide the kind of depth and stimulation that will produce sermons not just for Sunset Ridge, but for the church in the future. All we ask, Stan, is that there just be no more plaques or toilets. I think Woody had asked me earlier about next year. We're helping to bring Dr. J.J. Roberts, and he will do Isaiah 1 through 39 here. He did that for us a few years ago, so what we've asked him to do at Sunset Ridge is the rest of the book of Isaiah. He'll do 3 presentations, which will, I started to say videotape, but I don't guess that's quite the correct terminology anymore. We'll record it however that happens, and along with his PowerPoint slides and his curriculum for Bible classes will be available to you, so that'll be something to look forward to next year as well, that you'll have the entire book of Isaiah available by coming to the seminar. Stan, thank you.